lived in a world where energy was always something that we wanted to add because we didn't have enough. This is changing, and it's got fundamental consequences for everybody.
I really think that Southeast Asia and Asia is where the growth is going to be, and I'm really excited about the ability for Asia to make a choice. Do we follow the same old path, or do we follow a different path, or do we have a better one that's combined? And I think great opportunity.
This is not an energy transition. It's an energy transformation.
Hello and welcome to Sustainable Future. I'm JP Ong, coming to you from Energy Asia here in Kuala Lumpur. On this episode, I sit down with industry leaders across two panels to explore the biggest opportunities driving the clean energy transition. We kick off the first panel with one big question. Where exactly are we on the road to a sustainable future?
I guess, this is a really complex question that you're asking, but in very broad, simple terms, to achieve the energy transition, there are really just two things we need to do. Number one, we need to massively grow renewables, and we know about the tripling of renewables, the COP28 pledge by 2030. And secondly, we need to drive energy efficiency and reduce the amount of fossil fuel use. This transition is not happening in all parts of the world at the same pace. And we need to get comfortable that we're going to have these paradoxes. So Europe in 2023 below 70% fossil for the first time. The US is also post-peak fossil, post-peak oil. And in China, yes, more coal. And I suspect coal will have increased in 2024. But actually, China accounted for 55% of renewables growth in 2023, and I'd be surprised if it's less than that in 2024. Then you go to the developing world, Africa, where around a fifth of the world's population lives, but only use about a tenth of the energy per capita compared to the US. In 2023, Africa energy demand was flat. So the continent that uses the least energy is not getting access to energy. And clearly coming to Malaysia, 96% dependency on fossil, it's a really tough challenge. I was delighted to see flying in yesterday evening, there is floating solar on the approach to KL Airport, so look out for that next time you land at KL. Solar is being deployed, but not at the pace it needs to be.
Miguel, can you talk to us about why the transition towards a more sustainable future might be happening faster in some places based on what you've seen on the ground as part of EDP Renewables?
I think that it's out of question that the energy transition is happening because it's economical. So you have stable and predictable legal and regulatory framework, you have a functional grid, and then you need to be able to monetize and put your energy to good use. So when you have all these three engines running, you have investors willing to invest on bankable projects that can get financed. Across Asian countries, across APEC, we definitely see cases, and it's easy to map the countries that have already accelerated and are mature, the countries that are next in line, and the others. And I think that when we compare APEC to other regions, and APEC probably will be kicking on the hockey stick of growth towards 2030-40, but some countries are well ahead.
This is what I want to bring Coach Wanzen into, actually. Given the realities that are unique to places like Malaysia, you have, close to a decade now of rolling out some of these solar power solutions in Malaysia. Can you talk to us about what perhaps we have to think about when we're thinking about unique solutions to rolling out sustainable solutions, like you have been trying to do over the last decade or so?
Malaysia, I would say, is a little bit slow in the past, but slow and steady. That's where Malaysia started to build the fundamental in terms of policy stability for the energy part, because in energy field, there's a lot of different stakeholders. And one of the biggest challenge here is when the tariff rate is so low, how can we slowly to get the whole economics tune and transit to remove the tariff, to remove the subsidies from the governments? And that's the reason why in the past 2 years when Malaysia government, they're coming from National Energy Transition Roadmap, because this roadmap is the one that set the goal for Malaysia to move towards by 2050 to achieve 70% of our energy is all generated by renewable energy. And right now, I would say that we're moving forward into a new chapter right now in Malaysia. In the whole infrastructure in Malaysia, I would say relatively stable. So there's about 12 gigawatt in the country can go for solar. But the first 6 gigawatt is just purely solar. But the second 6 gigawatt from solar, you have to go with a battery energy storage system, which we call it BESS. You can build solar farm and power for your factory usage with solar and battery storage. At the same time, if let's say your premises is quite expensive for the land, for example, like data center, you can find a developer like Plus Energy, which will find other place of this land, which will build solar and BESS, which will provide firm power through the grid. So this policy, they provide more variety and more options for people, for business entity to choose. I would say this is the first step for Malaysia energy started to go into more liberalized.
When we talk about these systems, we often talk about it as being just renewables. But is there a need to perhaps accept that carbon is going to be very important? It's something that we'll have to deal with. And that's where something I want to ask Dr. Holmgren, actually, of Lanzatech, actually, because you, the company itself pioneers in not just capturing, but reusing carbon at the moment and turning that into special fuels. Can you talk to us about what your company's been doing in this field and how that perhaps bolsters any sustainable energy system for the future?
We need to get a circular economy going where we use as much of the carbon that we already have above ground over and over again. And that's essentially what we do. We are able to take a gas, for example, at an industrial site like a steel mill, a gas that's already, carbon that's already been used to make steel, but it's in excess. And instead of letting it be emitted into the atmosphere, we capture it and we reuse it. We have commercially operating plants at steel mills and ferroalloy plants that capture carbon monoxide and convert it into ethanol through fermentation. And that ethanol can then be converted to sustainable aviation fuel. It can also be converted to materials. Most people don't realize, but 30% of the barrel of petroleum, I'm sure you know, Nick, goes into making the stuff we use every day. Not just power, not just fuels, but the chair we sit in and the hats we wear. And that's the future we imagine, reusing carbon so that we can go further with the amount of carbon that we've already extracted and used once.
Sorry, Dr. Wei.
Absolutely. If I could just jump in on this. I mean, I think we are entering an era of electrification, which isn't to say the work that Jen's doing in carbon and that circular economy isn't important, because it absolutely is, and there'll be parts of the economy that electrification doesn't reach. But electrification is broadly growing at 2x the rate of overall energy demand. You've got an exponential growth curve going against a sort of very linear overall energy demand growth. And so these tipping points, you get to them pretty slowly. And I think one of the biggest things we mustn't forget about electrification is just the efficiency that it drives. An electric vehicle uses maybe a third or a quarter the amount of input energy to drive versus its internal combustion engine equivalent. And so this massive drive of, yes, the world needs more energy, but actually it's the amount of energy it needs at the end user point, not the input, the supply point.
Can I just, I'll make two comments. First of all, you give me electrons, I'll convert CO2. So deploy as many electrons as you want. We need energy to be able to create an economy around the conversion of CO2 to make products. So I'm fine. But I do think it's important for us to think about what we're trying to do. 30 years ago, people were laughing at solar. When will it ever be economic? The problem is, like Nick said, we get into this exponential growth curve. The more you deploy, the cheaper it gets. The cheaper it gets, the more you deploy. And so whenever you're doing something disruptive, and to really be able to create a new industry, we need disruptive approaches, and disruptive approaches take time. And what we need to do is help incentivize the first of a kind, because you build one, enables you to build the second one, and then the fourth one, and then the 16th one.
Feel free to correct me if I'm misunderstanding this. It seems that the innovations are there. then they're actually being proven and they actually exist, but it's a question of whether or not we're implementing it.
Yeah.
So if we look into the energy market with like these mobile phones or our tech, or even though like AI, the kind of innovation, the speed is pretty fast. But if we look into the energy infrastructures, it's quite different in terms of innovation and also the speed. There's a few things that we have to link together. One is a policy, one is economic. Economic will back to the demand and supplies, and the other one will back to infrastructures. And all this, you have to get the balance for these three triangles to reach the right timing. So when the timing is right, that's where we will see the deployment will be there. And right now, Malaysia, in probably about 5 years or 8 years ago, we have started to create our own this AI energy management system. But we can't really see the market demand. People, they don't really care about carbon credit. They don't really care about why do I need to deploy this smart element for my building. And battery at that moment, the payback period is more than like 10 to 15 years. Today, it can be about 5 years. So when you don't have that infrastructure, even though you have a good idea, but when you have no demand, because it's all back to my energy bill, it's a commodity market, it's all back to where's my payback period, you can't really deploy. So that's why the timing is very important, and the timing for each different country is also quite unique. That's why right now we will see there's a lot of different countries. In terms of policy, it's also pretty important because like Vietnam, they used to be very aggressive in the past, but right now because of probably the infrastructure is not ready. But your policy, when you're too ahead, then you have to balance out. So right now, looking to Vietnam market is slowing down. Malaysia is always slow in the past, but right now, when everything seems like good, we're ready, the timing's there. Malaysia and Philippines is one of, I would say, the populous and also the hot country in terms of renewable energy investment right now in Southeast Asia.
Miguel, I guess we've talked a lot about things centering around regulatory clarity. What do you think needs to improve in the regulatory landscape?
Being a liberal at heart, I think that this is not about subsidies, nothing, it's just getting the conditions for the market to upon. So if investors can invest freely, contract freely, and know how to operate within the grid and regulations, there's latent investment to accelerate, to create jobs, create wealth in the economy. So I really do think that really politicians, regulators need to get their act together because they're the biggest bottleneck now for renewables acceleration. Not subsidies, not is it economical, so we need to make sure that there is an investable environment. And with that, not talking even about renewables, it's a sector that can bring wealth to the economy if the conditions to invest are there.
So much to unpack and so little time. I'm here at Energy Asia in Kuala Lumpur, speaking with green business leaders about the pathways to a sustainable future. And in our second panel, I ask, are today's innovations enough to get us to a net zero future?
We know what are the core technologies that get us to a net zero economy. There are lots of them, but one above all, which is what I call massive, clean electrification. You electrify road transport. In high-latitude cold countries, you electrify residential heat, which isn't at the moment. There's some of it you can't electrify, and there you're going to need carbon capture and storage and hydrogen. And then we've got to produce all of that electricity in a zero-carbon fashion. And the predominant technology for doing that is going to be renewables. The collapse in the cost of solar PV has been extraordinary. Over the last 50 years, the cost of solar panels per watt of power has not come down 90%, not 99%, but 99.9%. And it's going to go on coming down, and the yields are going to go up. Battery storage is collapsing in cost. And that means that in many places, solar plus batteries is going to be the killer app of the energy transition. There may be a role for nuclear. We probably need to keep a fleet of gas turbines which run only a small proportion of the year to make up for when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. But the other one is grids. And when you put together all of these technologies, both in generation and grids, we're absolutely convinced that that 90,000 terawatt hours of a completely clean, zero-carbon electricity, let's say by 2060, is absolutely possible across the world, and it is the core of what we need to do to get to a zero-carbon economy.
I do want to bring Asad Razouk into this, actually. On your podcast, you've actually highlighted that you do think that renewable energy can actually meet the future demands of energy, regardless of where it's coming, regardless of the magnitude. Can you talk to us about why you're furiously optimistic that this is possible?
I'll give you just 2 data points. The first one is the entire world's electricity system is about 18 terawatt of energy consumption. The sun continuously gives you 10,000 times that amount. So you can see the direction of travel once you know that we've cut costs to what is now the cheapest electricity in history, solar power. Data point number 2, you can buy yourself literally 6 solar panels and a small battery. I mean, we have managed to put together a panel that literally is taking photons from the sun and giving you effectively unlimited free energy from the point at which you pay for that panel. And if you don't need any of that energy, just shift it to a battery. Last data point. If you look at deployment in China, you'll see that in 2024, China added something like 360 gigawatts of solar and wind. China, which has the best supply chain for nuclear in the world, added less than 4 gigawatts of nuclear in 2024. And that ratio, 99% solar and wind, 1% nuclear, is probably what you can expect going forward in those countries that have that supply chain and those skill set. And that's where the world is going.
I do want to try and at least connect the potential for supplying renewable energy with the demand drivers. And one of the bigger demand drivers that we talk about right now is coming from data centers. Ranggu, this is where I want to bring you in as well. Sure. Because it seems that it's at our fingertips to power everything with renewable energy. Talk to us about what you're seeing with regards to where data centers are heading with regards to sourcing energy.
Today, for example, about 400 terawatt hours power electricity is consumed for data centers. That's about 1.5%, 1.5% of the total global power consumption. If you fast forward just 5 years from now, by 2030 or so, we're going to see more than double consumption requirement that's going to drive the need for capacity in data centers. Now, there are 3 kind of stages that we look at it as an industry and how our company looks at it. From a near-term perspective, traditionally the data centers have been closer to urban centers, but now we're looking at how to move them towards where you are the source of the power. And also that helps you to improve some of the grid inefficiencies. So if you look at the next 2 to 5 years, if you look ahead, the medium term as we would look at it, we are looking at optimistically more from energy transition perspective. So low emission sources like natural gas, of course in conjunction with what's happening in solar, tied with battery and other energy sources that gives you a much more stable and predictable amount of power. From a long-term perspective, if you look at the next 10 years, we think nuclear will be an important complement to solar and other energy sources for the next 10, 15 years as the industry is focused on going 100% green.
And I think the optimism or the excitement is that if you can get to a green data center sooner rather than later, that means all other industries can take inspiration from that. Yeah. That's something that Atkins Realist is trying to realize. Well, pardon the pun, Wing Law. Can you talk to us about how realistic a green data center is actually right now, based on the studies and based on the things you've seen on the ground in your day-to-day operations?
We can see now solar and wind become more and more competitive. So this is one of the near term. We can replace all those the power generation by greener energy. We can see nuclear is another energy green energy can supply for the data center. In the medium term, using AI to see how we can allocate all those the green energy into the data center. Another greener way is talking about the SMR, is the small modulator reactor, which is under development. So we can see that is a more off-grid solution to just place the power generation next to the data center. In the long run, because we can see a lot of the connection not only within the country, or even across the country. So we need more smarter transmission and distribution grid with the advancement of the technology with the AI, so that we can come up with a holistic the transmission and distribution system to allocate all those green energy to wherever we want to use.
We'll have to touch on this right now, the role of nuclear power in a cleaner energy transition. Now, it seems that, that you and Ranggu see a role for nuclear power in this, but I do know that, Saad, you actually think that this is something that might not be as high a priority when we're trying to meet future energy demand from renewable and clean sources?
You have to start from the premise that solar, wind, and batteries are going to deliver energy superabundance. We're going to get there because we're scaling solar, wind, and batteries so fast. Nothing can keep up. And I don't have anything in particular against nuclear energy, except for the fact that it's going to be 1%, maybe 2%, or maybe 5% of what we have in 100 years. But solar, wind, and storage, you can build it fast, you can build it now, you can build it cheap. So you have to start from that superabundance destination where we're going. I mean, it's a mathematical certainty if you just look at the exponential curves. And then you can see the energy landscape pretty clearly from that point backwards.
I absolutely agree that the biggest by far is going to be solar. As for nuclear, I suspect that nuclear will be continually more expensive than combinations of solar plus batteries plus wind in most parts of the world. But in some places, I think it will still be deployed. There are places like South Korea, which probably don't have either the wind or the solar resources. There are very densely populated countries where there just isn't enough space. So I suspect that new nuclear will play a role, but I suspect it will be a subsidiary and secondary role to the absolute core, which is going to be wind and solar across the world.
Is intermittence a fair critique of renewable energies for your operations that need to make sure that there are no redundancies, that there are no downtimes, for instance?
Our industry, the data centers have to run 24/7 because we fuel the AI and growth of the consumers and businesses that use these services, which have to have no downtime. So how do you solve the intermittency problems is by various sources. Of course, you try to have multiple sources of energy coming in. You have storage becomes an important part. And the second part is how do you collaborate with the grid. The data centers themselves can be part of the grid. You can feed back some of the power from the data centers back into the grid to normalize the intermittency. The other thing is, even things like using AI for improving grid efficiency.
Mingla, what are some of the new innovations that you're seeing that are making it more possible for industries like data centers or other industries perhaps operate in a more efficient manner to make sure that less energy is actually wasted than necessary?
Current infrastructure, current building also occupying a lot of the energy. So at the moment now, we are doing a lot of the retro commissioning to baseline what exactly the power consumption of the existing building, and then how we can do to use the energy much smarter through, for example, retrofitting. The second is talking about is to extend the design life, because at the moment now so we don't understand the behavior of the actual life of the existing structure. So at the moment the design life gone, then we just take it down and then build a new infrastructure. Actually, it's causing more and more carbon throughout the process. Another thing now we are doing to using the innovation to extend the design life. And another green solution is we can use the renewable energy or nuclear to generate green hydrogen. Then we can ship all those green hydrogen to wherever we want to use. For example, mention about Korea. Then that is maybe one of the solutions. Now we mention about a lot of the technology. But one thing, don't miss is talk about is the delivery process. If it cannot find the right, delivery, partner or supply chain, then always causing a lot of the overrun, cost overspend, and then causing a lot of, the high cost. Choosing the right technology also need to choose, the right delivery model.
That's all for this episode of Sustainable Future. For more content, please head to our website. I'm JP Ong. Thanks for watching.